You have to choose a niche, and you have to be clear about who is in that niche. And then you need to say, what value can I create in that niche? Because you're choosing that niche because you feel alignment, right? Then as you do that, yes, absolutely, it's a self-worth, right? I know I can add value to this niche.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues, the podcast where we interview business owners on how they built their businesses and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is David Swin, and I'm a business coach and the founder of Purple Circle, where we help business owners achieve their first 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure year, all without sacrificing their quality of life. Before becoming a business coach and before founding Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7- and 8-figure coaching businesses and have been a consultant at several businesses doing over $100 million each, including some that are publicly listed and doing over $1 billion each. In every episode of the podcast, you're going to learn lessons that took our guests years to learn, and you'll be able to learn that in minutes. No matter if you're a new business owner or an established business owner, every episode is going to give you the clues in order to elevate your business.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues podcast. I'm Pedro, and today I'm joined by Nic Woodthorpe-Wright, founder and CEO of WWA Corporate Coaching, who built the first coaching company in the Middle East and has spent 20 years delivering B2B corporate coaching solutions across the region with a team of 100 plus ICF certified coaches. Nic's 30 years of multinational experience in the Middle East gives him a deep understanding of the complex cultural environment that makes leadership development in the region uniquely challenging and uniquely rewarding. WWA Corporate Coaching's client list spans multinational and large organizations across the Middle East, specializing in one-on-one executive coaching, team coaching, and facilitation, and coaching skills development for leaders and managers. Nic's mission to revolutionize leadership across the region has positioned WWA as the gold standard for corporate coaching solutions, proving that when you combine ICF excellence with genuine cultural intelligence, the impact on leaders and organizations becomes transformational. Welcome to the show, Nic.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you. Good to be here.
Good to have you here, by the way. And, I love for us to rewind a bit back to the origin story. You could be doing so many things with your life, Nic. Could be a plumber, could be a chef, but you chose coaching. Yeah, right? But you chose coaching, man. Can you walk us through why coach and how that journey started?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it started way, way back. And this was... the pivot point that I recall was around my late teens. My father was he was in sales, and he was selling financial services, and the organization he was with put him and his people through a program called Psychology of Achievement by Brian Tracy. And, and my father, made the tapes. It was tapes in those days. We're going back a bit. And said, hey, you should listen to these. And I went, yeah, whatever, Dad. And of course, completely ignored them, as any teenager does. But for some reason, I picked them up a year or so later, and they just blew my mind. They blew my mind around this idea that we as human beings have a capacity to make immense difference just by managing ourselves differently, by being more self-aware, if you like, taking responsibility, doing the work. And that began my connection with self-development, which along the way, numerous times brought up this thing called coaching. And each time I went, yeah, seems interesting. I'll get to that when I'm old and gray. And as you can see, Pedro, maybe not many, I am now old and gray.
You got there. Nice.
Yeah, I've arrived in one piece. And I guess, it was a calling. It definitely was a calling. And that's, years later, having been on my corporate journey and valued that experience, even if it didn't resonate with me all the time, got to the point where I had the opportunity to say, okay, now, coaching now. And I didn't know what it was. Those around me didn't know what it was. And so I really had to, and I was in the Middle East at this point. I'd been here for 35 years. And then I needed to really take a deep look at what was coaching, how could I become a coach, and how do I begin this industry, quite frankly, in the Middle East. There was nobody here. Nobody knew what it was. I didn't know what it was. And so it's been an incredibly interesting journey, which I'm sure we can get into. But that's the sort of the origin story, if you like.
Interesting. Okay. First of all, let's establish one thing for the audience, right? You're not originally from the Middle East. I got that right?
That is true. I'm originally from the UK. I have traveled for many years. In fact, I grew up in the region as a young boy. My father was posted here. So my connection with the region started many, many years ago. And of course, grew up the rest of my years, studied in the UK, started my formative work experience in the UK, and then hit a point where it said, you know what, I'm not ready to settle down yet. I want to go on another adventure. And yeah, of all the options, I chose Dubai. And Dubai was not on the map then. 35 years ago, nobody had heard of it. And UAE wasn't even, people didn't know where that was. So, I had a friend here and they said, come on out, check it out. I did. And it was a fantastic experience because it really brought back a lot of my formative memories. But also I realized that this was a great place to have an adventure. And it has not stopped being that all the way through.
Okay. So that was important because you're in Dubai, for context, and then you're opening shop for your coaching business, your coaching practice, right? And but you're not originally from there. And I want to understand one thing, because at the start, in the early days for coaching, I'm not saying this is your case, but a lot of coaches out there are like testing waters, like like I'm helping people, this is a calling, I'm trying to make this work, giving advice, mentoring, and eventually got to a point that, you know what, I'm building a real business around this, So when did you felt like, okay, this is something that it's really a business, and not just something I'm trying out? Because I'm not sure if it's the first paying client, the first invoice, the moment you realize, okay, this is something,
Yeah. Okay, so I think the moment I had to make a very clear decision, right? And I got tested on that decision at a pivot moment. So I was working in corporate, and I really got a level of frustration, and I made the decision to say, look, I'm going to leave corporate and set my coaching up, but I needed to prep that process, right? You don't just go from one to the other. So I knew that it was going to be 3 or 4 months out before I would resign. Interesting, I came back into work the next day and I got this call from my GM. And the GM, and I was shocked. I was thinking, but he can't know that I'm leaving. What, is he bugged my house or what? It was like freaked me out a little bit, because he wouldn't normally call me in at first thing on a Monday morning. Sat me down, said, I've got some great news for you. I've got this huge promotion. I'm going to send you off to run a country. Are you ready? Good to go. And I went, yeah, sounds good. Can I get back to you? And he was like, what do you mean get back to me?
That's weird.
Yeah. But that was that pivot moment. I had to make a decision. What am I doing? And I was called into the bright lights, big city kind of effect of, do I stay where I am? And this is a great opportunity, blah, 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 versus am I really, truly passionate? And, there was a coaching question that came out from my wife, which was, how did you feel the moment he told you about this new job? And I just went back and my heart sank. My heart sank in that moment. I knew instantaneously that I needed to go down this road of coaching. So, that was the moment when clarity arrived. And this is the power of coaching, right? And we've all experienced that. But it was absolutely real. And I think from then on, I never questioned going forward. It was always like, this is it. This is the one. I can feel it. I sense it. But then you get into the reality of doing it. And in the early stages, I had to go and certify as a coach because I wasn't that. So I did. I aligned myself with the ICF because I realized from a very early age or early point that I needed to make sure that I was aligned with standards, appropriate standards. And that might be different for everybody. But that was how I was going to present myself to the outside world. And then I had to go out and sell that, and I really, I just went to town on everything and anything, and I ended up in newspapers, on TV, on radio, and this is early days, right? Nobody knew what coaching was, so it was a virgin market, and out of that process, I ended up getting a lot of clients, and a number of those clients were business owners, entrepreneurs, and some of those businesses were big businesses, and they'd say, "Work with us, we need to work," and then dawned on me fairly quickly that actually what I wanted to do was to work with leaders. And that's when I really started to shift from coaching anybody and everybody to actually there's a certain niche that brings me alive, and I'm really excited by that. And that's when I started to work specifically with leaders. And at this point, it was just me, right? It was just me working hard and getting on with it to a point, quite frankly, where I really just got burnt out because I had a lot of business. I was coaching all the time, and it wasn't sustainable. I know it sounds weird, even when we're doing something we're passionate about, but there's another part of me which is the sales part, right? And so then I had to make a decision. Where do I sit with that? And the pivot has been a huge one for me, moving away from being a coach. But I've experienced it, I've seen it, I've done it, so I know what it is. And then how do I sell it? And now what I do, as we've spoken about, is that I run an organization that sells coaching. And then we have other great professionals that come in and deliver that. And there's obviously many of the processes that we run through to ensure all of those processes run smoothly. But on a high level, that's what we do. And because I know coaching, because I know how powerful it is, it's easy for me to show up in front of a client and show them how important this process is. They feel it in my energy.
Okay, couple things. Okay, the first one that comes up to mind is that you mainly pioneered a market, and there's always a trade-off, right? Some people would think, oh, that's easy. Nobody was doing coaching. But at the same time, I worked in sales. And I can understand how hard it is to sell something people don't even understand what it is. It's almost like half an hour of an awakening process. It's almost like a nightmare. And you're just trying to educate people, right? So I understand the trade-off. So that's very interesting. And eventually, you got to a point, the evolution to your own practice, which is like working with leaders, right? That's who you serve today. And I would love for us to do a little bit a game of pretend here, okay? Sure. So let's pretend I'm one of those leaders. I'm your avatar in front of you, right? First thing, how would I be able to find you, Nic, marketing-wise?
Well, a lot of our bigger projects come through word of mouth. We've been doing this for over 20 years, right? And so our network is very strong. And that's great because I think the best work comes ultimately through word of mouth and people that have tried and tested you. Of course, we've got our website. You find us on Google search. We rank very highly there for searching on coaching in the region. And of course, we've got our sales processes for reminding people we're here and offering our services, if you like. That's how we go about that process. But it's really about maintaining clients that we've worked with over many years, and that's having to sell cold is hard work. But when you have a warm audience, then you've already got something that's going to continue in terms of a conversation. But and people just find us out of the blue, and we get calls as well from nowhere, and people are already saying, "Hey, we heard that you do coaching. Talk to us."
Okay, so I'm still that same guy. I'm still your ICP unit leader, right? So I was referred to you word of mouth, right? Someone told me, "Hey, you got to work with WWA or Nic or whatever that looks like," or even I visited your website. Let's put it like this. It resonated, what you got out there resonated with me, okay? And I reached out. So we can speed up the sales process a little bit if you want, or if you want to talk about that a little bit, you can. But let's say there's alignment, right? You guys
Yeah.
see you can help me. I see you guys can help me at WWA. Now, can you give me like a little peek behind the curtain of how does it look like to work with your company and the potential outcomes I can expect, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say that you become a client of ours, and remember that we're not selling to individuals, we're B2B, and so you're probably a decision maker in the system. So you might be a CHRO, you might be an HR lead, you might be a talent director, and so forth. So those are the people that we're predominantly talking to on the front end. But then you are setting up a project for leaders in your organization, and that's where we come in. So we're talking about what structure of process you want to go through. First of all, it's so important for us to know, what are the strategic objectives of your organization? How does this particular program fit that? What are the challenges and insights that you're looking to work on? So first we want to make sure we can get traction, and the only way we can get traction in an organization is understand where they need, where they are and where they need to go. So that's part of the sales process, as you well know. Let's say we've got that in place. That's all aligned. Then it's about, okay, a number of people in your organization, the level at which we're coaching. And then what we'll do once we get going is that we'll use our platform. We have a coaching platform that we use to help people go through a process. And that first part of the process is selecting the right coach for them. So there's coaches that have on our platform. They get access to those coaches. They get a chemistry session with those coaches. Then they select their coaching. Then it's really important that at the early stages, we've got some context of that coaching journey. So that context can come from a number of places. That's assessment. That's formal assessment, potentially, right? Not everybody has formal assessment, but we actively encourage that. That's stakeholder engagement. So you've got a line manager, you've got another key representative of that journey. And then you've got the individual themselves, right? Of course, they're part of the process. They've got information, they've got knowledge. So we access those pieces of information to understand, okay, what's alive here? What are the objectives? And with the individual, we set some clear, what we call public objectives. Now, public and private are two different areas. Both are relevant and important, but the public objectives are the ones that get presented formally into the organization. And of course, the coachee is very aware of that, the participant. And then we use those and we structure the journey over 3, 4, 5, 6 months around those objectives. And we rate those objectives at key moments along the journey so that when we come back in to speak to stakeholders again along the journey, we're able to provide them with a sense of where the individual believes they are on this journey. Now, that may be resonant with the stakeholder, but it may not. But it provides an active form of a conversation. So we're not operating in a silo from the organization. We're aligned with the stakeholders and the system is aware of the objectives that are being worked on. And then we get to work. I guess we're pulling the system together around the development focus of that individual. Now, sometimes we're working with 50 people within an organization, right? Sometimes more. So you can imagine that you start pulling that data together, and then you've got something very interesting for organizations. And of course, we have to work with confidentialities, right? So, what's being presented, of course, from a public perspective is already being acknowledged as being in the selective public domain, not the whole public, around the stakeholders and so forth. But we get to use that, and we get to use that information for the organization in terms of understanding what is the return on investment, what is the impact, what is the focus, and that allows the organization then to make better decisions pretty much in real time. Because you can do an employment survey, and we know it takes X number of months to do the survey, and then everybody's completed, and then it goes into the system, and then the management get the report, and everybody's running around trying to understand what the report's saying, and nothing really comes out of that for quite some time. But what we've got is we've got live information around a very key segment of the organization, and that allows some really interesting conversations and actions to potentially happen on a more systemic level.
Okay, interesting. we just understood how does it look like today, a picture of today. But I think we could use some insights from the journey itself, and I'll give you an example of what I'm really curious about, because a lot of coaches out there listening could get a nugget from this. I see a lot of coaches struggling with scaling, right? Sometimes they're afraid of bringing someone in, even the first coach, the second coach, a closer, because they're afraid of tarnishing their brand, right? There's quality control, there's a lot of moving pieces. So first, how did that look like for you? Your first coach, your second
Yeah.
coach, was it scary? And how do you keep quality on check?
Yeah. It's interesting. The first few coaches I worked with actually were really close friends. So it wasn't difficult on any level, right? We had a relationship, we had trust, we had connection, and we shared passion. So the early days, 3-4 coaches, suddenly we're working as a unit. And that was pretty easy because we're talking all the time, we're aligned, we've come from a similar set of standards and so forth. But it was after that it becomes interesting, right? Because suddenly you're having to bring people into your system that you don't know very well, and so you're having to trust them and also guide them in terms of your system. And we have over 100 coaches, right? So we've had to develop very clear selection systems, testing systems, because we don't just say, oh, I can see you've got a PCC or an MCC certificate, therefore you are a coach, and that works for us. We have to run them through simulation coaching exercises. We assess that against the ICF competency framework. We need to know that their style, their approach is aligned with who our clients are, that they have the appropriate backgrounds, the appropriate skills, and many things, right? So there's a selection process that you get to. But in the early stages, yes, you are going to work with people and then that stretches the next level, and that's a process, right? It's a slow process, but invariably my experience is that you're not having to hire 5, 10, 15 coaches in one go. I mean, we do that now sometimes, but in the early stages, you got to find one, and then you got to find another one, and so you need to build connection, relationship, and trust with those people as you go along, for sure. And eventually, this is a really interesting part of the journey, right? You're going to have to decide that, are you a coach or are you somebody working in the business or on the business? These are the key pivot moments, and it's difficult because I've been there, right? Where you suddenly say, I had to say, okay, I'm no longer coaching. And there was sadness in that, right? But I also had to make that decision because I couldn't end up being a jack of all trades. I had to make a decision which side I was on within the business, and then make that commitment. So ultimately, you're going to have to, unless you find somebody else to do that and you stay in the business coaching, all well and good. But there is a decision at some point that means as you start to scale, there are different roles that need to be filled, and coaches are only part of that process.
Interesting. Okay. Now, I'm curious about another topic, which I see coaches struggling a lot. And I can only imagine you trying to sell this in the Middle Eastern region without people even knowing it, which is pricing, right? But I'm not talking about hard numbers here. I'm talking about the mindset behind it. It's a very self-worth path. You are trying to replace a corporate income, right? In a way.
Yeah.
So how do you think about the topic today? And were there any lessons along the way that shaped how you landed where you are right now?
Oh, so many lessons. Oh my goodness. You know what? I think, first of all, at this day and age, when I was coaching in the early stages, it wasn't so much the case, but as I've gone through this process, I've had to make the decision time and time again, and it's becoming more nuanced, which is around niche. You have to choose a niche, and you have to be clear about who is in that niche. And then you need to say, what value can I create in that niche? Because you're choosing that niche because you feel alignment, right? Then as you do that, yes, absolutely, it's a self-worth, right? I know I can add value to this niche. But in order for me to add value, this has to be a fair exchange. And it's about understanding what that fair exchange is. Yes, you need to understand market rates, but at the end of the day, that's only a small part of it, right? Because I've got coaches in my system that are charging I mean, unbelievable amounts of money to go out and coach, and to points that you go, is that really possible that somebody could be earning that kind of money? Well, the truth is, are they radically different to some of my other coaches? They're good, but they're not that much better. They have just established themselves in a certain niche to say, that's my niche, that's the price I'm going to ask, not because it has any other meaning other than it makes them take me seriously. And they're going to think twice, not from a money perspective, but then they're going to go, what am I going to go? I'm going to go with the person that's charging half this rate, or I'm going to go with the person that's charging this full rate. Remember, I'm in corporate, right? And if we're working with senior people, if you're charging half that rate, they're not even going to look at you. So, your rate really will establish where you pitch yourself, who you're talking to, and how seriously people are going to take you. So yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. There are so many different factors in there, but yeah, you have to find your space. You have to really know and believe and feel that you can serve that space really well, and then market that, sell it, and put a price on it and go. And when people say no, you say, thank you very much. Maybe I'm not the right person for you. That's okay. But hold fast.
Got to stand your ground. It sounds like it. Okay.
You do. And you will, and it might take a little while. And it's a bit scary, that part, but ultimately, people come out of the woodwork that won't even flinch at paying whatever rate you're going to. They won't flinch.
Okay.
But don't, there are a lot of bottom feeders. Don't go there. To be honest with you, in my experience, as soon as we start worrying too much about getting the right price at the right, we end up becoming a race for the bottom, because whatever we put, someone's going to go, oh, that's too much. And then we sort of discount, and then we drop it, and we're not feeling so great. And when we show up, we're like, oh God, I've got this client again. You're not showing up in your best form, and that's not good for them either. So this is where you really need to be fairly clear and say, okay, if that rate's not the rate, then good luck. I wish you luck out there. There is a coach for you, but I'm not that person.
Okay, fair enough. It's an exchange, right? Now, let's shift gears for a second. I'm curious where you're taking WWA, right? Looking ahead, where do you see the business going?
These are exciting times, stressful times, because where we are, we're stuck in the middle of a very interesting environment right now, which means the whole of the business environment is going through, should we say, a stressful time. But let me look big picture from coaching point of view. What I'm finding, what I believe, and I see this in experience, is that coaching is just finding its feet in this part of the world. That's exciting. But it also means that it becomes more competitive, because when someone sees opportunity, there's not a few people that see it. There's generally a lot more people that see it. So we're really having to make sure that, as an organization, we're producing deep value. We're partnering with the client. We're bringing heart and passion to what we're doing, and we continue to maintain standards. And we're getting creative with what our clients need. So, we're a coaching organization. We're not a training organization. But what it means is we come from a coaching mindset, and that doesn't mean that we only do coaching, right? We do many things, but we always bring a coaching mindset. That's a differentiator for us. And that has served us extremely well, because people respect coaching. They respect coaches, and they know that if you put someone in front of a room that is a good facilitator, but also comes from a coaching mindset, they're going to make a very different impact on the room to someone that does not have that coaching mindset. And that is now being sought after. And so we're constantly looking at ways we can be in deep service, because at the end of the day, our purpose is liberating leadership to make the world work better, and that comes in many ways, right? Coaching is one form, but sometimes we don't even mention the word coaching, but it informs everything we bring to our clients.
Mm. Especially in dire times, right? This is the moment we need to stop reacting and thinking about purpose and where we want to go and all of that. But yeah, completely understand. Exciting times, to be honest, right? Thinking
It
about
is. It
people are
is.
really getting it in that region, you know? Now, whenever we're aiming towards something new, right? Always something we're refining in the present. So, what are you currently trying to improve or tighten up in your business right now?
hmm So a number of things. Of course, AI is front and center of that part of the journey. And it's interesting for me. I went to the International Coach Federation Converge conference in Paris a couple of months ago, and AI. The conversation around AI was front and center, and there's multiple facets to that, right? Around how do we as coaches use AI in multiple ways, right? Whether that's just in terms of our back of house managing, or literally how do we use that inside coaching, or how do we manage ourselves, the fact that AI is coming in and doing coaching. So there's so many different elements to manage it. So yeah, that's an important part of our growth and development. We are looking for ways to use AI to bring more intelligence to our clients, bring more value to our clients, and serve the coaching process. Because I don't believe the human aspect of coaching is going away. We are going to be more specific about the value that we add in that form. AI coaching is going to come and it's going to add value, great. But I don't believe it's going to supersede who we are as coaches. But it does mean that we have to double down on the specific human skills that we bring around simple things like deep empathy, deep listening. Somebody said this thing to me the other day. It was an AI expert. He said, look, AI sees silence as a lack of data. We as coaches know that within the silence, there's incredible knowledge and information flowing in that moment. So, if you just look at it from that point of view, the human aspect to that, but that doesn't mean AI can't be of deep service to the process that we have. And of course, there's many questions around how we manage that, around the confidentiality of that, around how we structure it, how we make sure that trust is a critical part of developing that within our business, so that we don't undermine this thing that we've created as a coaching industry. It's really important. What we don't want to do is find ourselves having lost, or that the industry are losing faith in us because of the shortcuts that we've made. So it's a process right now. There's a deep conversation going on, but that I think is I don't think people would be surprised to hear that's an important part of our future think.
Hot topic right there. Okay. Yeah. Now, back to my game of pretend. Let's shift gears for a second. I want to do something different right now. Let's pretend we have a time machine in front of us. A little bit of a sci-fi thing here right now. And we have a couple stops. Okay. Mm-hmm. So first stop is you can go back in time when you open shop, right? You can go back in time and you can give yourself one piece of business advice you wish you knew when you started your coaching business. What would that be?
I would go back, not to the very beginning, which I found, I look back now and I think, wow, that was an exciting time, a stressful time, but exciting. I would go back to probably 2 or 3 or 4 years in, when it was that moment for me to give up coaching. I think I hung on too long to that. And I don't think I did the best transition, if in all honesty. It wasn't that clean. And so, yeah, I would say be clear about your decision earlier about what the role is that you're going to play within this organization. That would be a very clear decision if I went back to myself.
Okay. The difference between working in the business and on the business, right? It's about the hat you're choosing to wear at a certain time. Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
Now, second stop. You can go back in the entire journey. You can pick the time you want to go back to. It's basically a moment, if you have one, that you really cherish, the one that you looking back, you think, that's why I started this,
Yeah.
and it's not an aha moment. It's more like a fulfilling moment that almost explains the entire challenges, the sleepless nights. What would that be?
I think I look back, and I mentioned there, into my first 2 years, and it was mad. It was totally mad, but I was so excited by this thing called coaching that nobody else understood. And I was just talking to everybody, doing everything. And just moments along the way that I look back now and I laugh. And I can tell you one which will make you smile, right? And it was because, and I was invited onto TV, but not just any old TV. I'm in the region, right? I was invited onto Urdu TV. Now, I don't speak Urdu. Okay. And here I am with this really fantastic interviewer, and so we're having to call in. So I'm meant to be doing coaching to a call in. And so there are people calling in Urdu. She's listening for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then she's giving me like a 3-second translation of what they've said. And they said, "So what should they do, Nic?" And it was hilarious, and those are sort of the mad experiences you have along the way. And I just thought, this is crazy, but it's fun.
Right?
That I'm doing this. And, and I think that those are the moments when I thought, this is more than just me coaching. There is something happening here. And I'm right at the forefront of it, and it's messy and it's crazy, but I'm in here doing it. And I think, all of you that are out there stepping into this thing called coaching, there'll be some new elements to you, and it's reinventing itself all the way along, and you're part of that reinvention. And I think, bring that excitement, bring that little bit of madness to the process, because it needs it. This, in my opinion, everybody should be a coach. Now, it doesn't mean you have to coach others, but it would be really good that the whole of humanity had at least some of the basic skills of coaching. Then we can have much better conversations. I think there'd be a lot more empathy and a lot better listening skills in the world. But, we can't have that yet. But every one of the people are stepping forward saying, yeah, I think this is my thing. Fantastic. Do it, lean in, and get excited about what's possible in that place. Give it your best shot.
I love that. And if someone listening wants to connect with you or follow your work, right? And we're going to have all the links in the description, but what's the best way for people to find WWA, and connect with you guys?
Sure. As a business, you can find us online at WWA Corporate Coaching. You can find me on LinkedIn at Nic Woodthorpe-Wright. That's Nic Woodthorpe, WOODTHORPE. And then WRIGHT. It'll pop up, I think, as soon as you put NICW, the wood bit in. But anyway, find me there. And I think if there's an email that you want to put, it's nic@wwacoaching.com. Reach out with any questions. I know what it's like to be on this journey. I think Pedro, you and I were talking before you came on. I say, how you going on? And I said, it's been a tough week, and there are great weeks and tough weeks, but I think I always look back and say, I know that I'm doing the right thing. I know I'm in the place that I need to be, that I should be. That doesn't mean that the world is necessarily always on your side as it feels, but ultimately, we're making a difference. And I think it's important, deeply important work that we're all doing as coaches in whatever form you're doing it.
Okay. Looking back at the chat we just had, I feel the need to highlight certain points. So allow me to do so. Okay. I'm thinking about the origin story, right? I love the teenager bit when you're like, your father was like, hey, check this out. And you're like, whatever, Dad, right? And a few years later, you're like, okay, maybe I'll take a look. Just classic teenager. Exactly. I love that. Moving forward with the origin story, still is like when you are being promoted, right? And your heart sank. You're like, oh my God, what am I really truly passionate about? And it was not that. So that's a pivotal moment, an aha moment for you. That's very interesting because some people would be like, "Oh my God, I got promoted. This is amazing." You're like, "Not really. I'm like half my foot is outside the door already." Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So there's that. Please.
And just to double down on that slightly, right? Don't rely on your head to answer that question for you, because that's where the chaos happens. That's when you need to go to your body, and this will be a very coaching. Coaches will understand this better, right? There's better sources, or there's other sources of information other than your head, which is a messy place to go and to seek clarity.
Right. Great reminder too. Another part I was thinking about is when you mentioned I was working corporate, then I went to my own business, and I kind of burned out, right? You're back to back on coaching calls and all that, and that was not sustainable. Although you had a passion for it. Now here's the kicker, and that's why this hits home. I worked in corporate banking, and I worked at Ernst & Young here in Brazil, a consulting firm. And when I clocked out, man, I clocked out, right? It was sayonara to everyone, and that's it. And then later down the road, I became the podcast host here. And not just that, I'm a coach too, right? And sometimes my wife, like I'm in my office and she's listening in the whatever she is, she's at our place, and she's like, "Why are you laughing so much?" Right? That doesn't seem like work. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. But sometimes I'm hitting 10 hours, 11 hours because I like what I do, but at the same time, it drains me, right? I'm like, oh my God, I can hit burnout even if I like what I'm doing. So that really hits home. I need to create some boundaries. I'm not great at that right now. I'll be honest.
Yep.
Okay. So that really, really interesting. And last but not least, I would say is the power of niching. I felt that in my skin, right? I think the perspective I have it today, and I see a lot of coaches out there, it's like, oh, I can help you. Deep down, they can help them. Okay. It's totally fair. And most of them can truly help, but it's not about them. It's more about the perception from the ICP. For example, if you're trying to help everyone, you're going to be treated as a commodity. There's that. It's hard to stand out in so much noise, right? And you're easily comparable if you don't have a niche. So if you do have a niche, you're the go-to guy. Right? You have your price, you run with it. They're like, how many people can help me doing X, Y, and Z? And they're like, not many. So I have 2 or 3 options, and you're like, okay, that guy was cool. I think he can help me, So powerful reminder too. Now, this is just my long-winded way of saying, Nic, I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you being here and sharing so openly today with us. It was great having you on.
Great. Appreciate your time as well. And keep up the good work of the conversation, keeping the conversation absolutely alive. And I'm happy that I was able to join you and talk a little. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. This episode, as well as this podcast, was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help business owners elevate their business to 6, 7, and 8-figure years, all without burning out. If you're looking to grow your business, as well as get the time freedom that you are looking for, visit us at joinpurplecircle.com and see what we can do to help you and your business.